Welcome and thank you to everyone for joining our first Live Longer Better network session. I'm delighted to see so many of you here today, some names and faces that I recognise, but lots of new ones too, which is great to see, and also a wide variety of organisations. For those that I haven't met before, I'm Elise Rendell, Physical Activity Manager at Kent Sport. Firstly, I'll just start off with some housekeeping. Lou mentioned if you can all keep microphones on mute, please, unless you are speaking. There will be the opportunity to ask some questions after speakers, but we can also use the chat function, so please do pop any questions in there and then we can obviously move to those following the speakers' presentations. If there are any IT issues, Louisa is our expert today, so feel free to pop a message in the chat if there are any queries or audio problems. Failing that, sometimes the log out and log back in I find does work, so hopefully you won't have any fingers crossed, but if you do need to dip in, dip out, then as I say, do give that a go and hopefully that will work. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared afterwards with everybody. We've got a really busy agenda, so we must get going and crack on. In a moment, I'll provide a very brief background to the work about Kent Sport before handing over to our special guest, Muir, who's going to be talking about the Live Longer Better revolution. We'll then hear from a local case study from Alex from Age UK, Herne and Whitstable, who will be talking about their work to embed activity into the services that they are delivering. We'll then have a very short break, which we can stretch our legs, grab a cup of tea, before coming back to reflect on what we've heard this morning, but also discuss how the network can support you moving forwards and in your work and in your roles. Okay, so just to provide a bit of context about the work of Kent Sport and how Live Longer Better fits into our work. We are the active partnership for Kent and Medway, funded by Kent County Council and also Sport England. And as you'll see from the slide there, our mission is changing lives through sport and physical activity. You'll also see that we've got a number of key areas of work, so connecting communities, positive experiences for children and young people, recover and reinvent, which is particularly important at the moment following COVID, the lockdown periods, and supporting organisations to get back delivering activity, and also active environments, which covers things like active travel and green social prescribing as well. And then in the middle there, you'll see connecting with health and wellbeing. And this is where our Live Longer Better work sits. This is really about bringing partners and networks together, so providers of activity, but also organisations who are delivering services for older people, highlighting the benefits of activity and being active, but also working to see how we can best embed activity into pathways and service delivery. We obviously want to ensure that there's co-creation and joint working between partners and sectors going forwards. Ultimately, we're working towards a shift in perceptions and culture regarding the way that we think about and support older people. Okay, I will move on to our special guest speaker with an introduction. I won't steal any of your thunder, Muir, but I'm delighted to say and welcome that we've got special guest Muir, who is knighted for his services to the NHS, and he's going to introduce us to the Live Longer Better revolution and some of the theory behind it. Over to you, Muir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So let me see if I can work the technology. Louisa, how am I doing?
Have you shared your screen, Muir?
Yes, can you see it?
Not yet, so you need to click share and then click on the screen.
Yeah, I thought I'd done it. Oh, yeah.
And then click on your PowerPoint.
How's that?
There we go. And then when ready for presentation, and you're all good to go.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to imagine your mum or dad or your grandparents or members of a bridge club in Sevenoaks or a bowls club in Canterbury or a mosque in Dover. And I'm going to show you what we say to people that age, people my age, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And our aim is that actually 1,000 people should be able to give this pitch so we get it everywhere. So let me start off. Ladies and gentlemen, You will have heard there's a lot of talk about population aging as though it's a tidal wave. But this isn't the case because it's not all due to aging. We in the Living Longer Better program have got 3 aims. The first is to increase activity. And I don't like the word physical activity. It's activity physical, cognitive, and emotional. It'll help people feel better this year, prevent dementia and frailty. These are the diseases people fear most. They don't fear cancer or heart disease or even death. It's being dependent on others. And the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. Regain what was lost, recover strength, stamina, suppleness, and skill, and recondition your body if you've got long-term conditions, as most of us have. Our aim is to increase health span, not lifespan, but health span, and decrease the duration of time where you're dependent on others. The third aim is to decrease the need for health and social care. And I'll say a little bit about how we can do that. But you can see here that as you grow older, as you live longer, a gap opens up between how well you are, your maximum level of ability, and your actual level of ability. And when you get a long-term condition like heart disease, that gap gets wider. But at any age and with any degree of disability or disease and any number of conditions, you can close that gap. And we can reduce acute health care because we know that if you're fitter, if you have more resilience, then you respond better to chest infections and other problems and will be admitted less often to hospital. Hospitals are wonderful, but you should stay out of them as much as you can. You see, we understand the science now. And there are 2 phases in life, a phase of growth and development, a turning point, and then, ladies and gentlemen, it's downhill all the way. The good news is that there are 3 other factors taking place that we can influence. And the first, as I said, is loss of fitness. And for almost all of us, a fitness gap opens up from the turning point, which for many people starts about the age of 22, when they get their first desk job or first sitting job. Because it's the car, the computer, and the desk job. These are the causes of our modern epidemics. I don't use the word lifestyle. These are environmental problems. We need to change the way in which people interact. And I'm very pleased to see you've got a green environment initiative, because I think it's vitally important that we change the way things work in the environment. The good news is that at any age, you can close the fitness gap. And there are 5 S's of fitness, ladies and gentlemen: strength, stamina, suppleness, and skill. And just actually think, what is the 5th S of fitness? Psychological. Hollow laughter in the room. The second process that affects us is disease. And disease gets more common the longer we live. Not so much because aging causes disease, so you need a bit of luck to avoid the diseases we can't prevent, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But most diseases come from living in an environment that we're not genetically equipped for. You see, for hundreds of generations, we've been very active, and we've encouraged genes that accelerate the deposit of fitness when any food became available. But these are precisely the long genes to have in the world dominated by the car, the computer, and the desk job. And as you can see here, the combination of aging and loss of fitness may mean you drop below what I call the line. The line. And this is the level of ability required to get to the toilet in time. And after that, it's game over. Social care is required. Again, the good news is that no matter how many long-term conditions you've got, no matter how old you are in years, you can close the fitness gap and stay above the line. But that takes us on to thinking about the third factor. So the problems are disease loss of fitness, and negative thinking. So we need to prevent and tackle disease, including introducing activity therapy for everyone with long-term health problems. We need to regain fitness, and we need to think positive. Because it's not aging, it's loss of fitness, disease, and negative thinking. A culture that's pessimistic and negative, based on the assumption that everything is due to aging. So this is the new agenda. Oh, hang on. Now, I've told you the science, ladies and gentlemen, but there's also very strong scientific evidence about what we can do. And here, this is from an organization called NICE. Delaying or preventing dementia, disability, and frailty. This is really what people are interested in. People say to me they quite like a nice little heart attack and pop off. And I say to them, well, listen, sunshine, as we say in Glasgow, if you do nothing, you probably won't have a nice little heart attack. You'll probably finish up stuck in a chair, a nuisance to your nearest and dearest. So the evidence is strong. And we've just published our book on decreasing the risk of dementia, probably the single condition most feared. We can't prevent Alzheimer's disease, but there are many other causes of dementia. And even the medical profession has woken up. And there's a wonderful report produced by the Medical Royal Colleges. I never thought I'd see this. Look at it. Exercise, the miracle cure. So let me just finish there, ladies and gentlemen of the Bowls Club or the Bridge Club or the Mosque. And let me move on to people like the people in this group, who are influential people in Kent. And just to tell a little bit about what we're doing, and it's developing a system. The 20th century was the century of the bureaucracy. The 21st century is the century of the system and the market. And a system is a set of activities with common aims and common objectives. And I've been through the aims, the three aims: to increase activity, physical, cognitive, and emotional, to increase health span, and to reduce the need for health and social care. Now, here are our objectives. And as you can see, there's a broad range of objectives. Some very interesting ones in here that different parts of the country are working on. For example, to minimize and mitigate the effects of deprivation. And I'm finding very good work being done by Age UKs on this in different parts of the country. And this, if I was in the Bridge Club, I'd be showing this probably and say, well, let's talk about dying well as well as living well. It's a thing we're not talking about. It is entering the public debate, but we need to talk about it. So these are the objectives, a single set of objectives for all the organizations. And we are saying in Kent, if you become, as you are, part of the system for living longer, better, these are the objectives. Now, how you deliver objectives is through networks. And you still need bureaucracies for what are called linear tasks, like the fair and open employment of staff, or the most efficient procurement of hospital X-ray machines. But when dealing with complexity, you need a network. This is the century of the system and the network. And I think we've got many of the people in the room here. I use the word room virtually, because it's the network, it's the internet that really enables system and networks to flourish. And we can see here the people we need to get into the network with as many older people as possible. And I spoke in Worcester the other week, and more than half the room were over 60. There were volunteers in various projects coming in. So we need to think about how older people get involved in community groups. And Age UK, I know, has always got a large number of volunteers, many of whom are older. Now, the three things we do in Live Longer Better are system development, encouraging networks, and culture change. This is a cultural revolution to create a culture of enablement. And I don't particularly like the word care, which for many people means doing things for people. So we need to change how people think. And that means the development of a new language, for example, talking about enabling, saying that it's key for older people to have purpose. That it's not just activity, physical activity. We want physical, cognitive, and emotional, and that might include raising money for Explore Kent, because it creates jobs for young people. Older people should be creating jobs for younger people. And I'm very interested in competition between groups, Canterbury and Tunbridge Wells, for example. Then we've got a learning program, and this will go out through GP information systems. And digital inclusion is still a big, big issue, but it's changing very fast thanks to COVID. And then our learning program is also aimed at, probably in Kent, I'd guess there's about 1,200 people who need to think in a different way. Pharmacy assistants, primary care nurses, wardens of sheltered housing, care home staff, and a lot of the medical profession too. So, we need a revolution, the living longer, better revolution, to deal with the tidal wave. And now, if I can escape from this, or Rita, you switch me off.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Muir. I think we've got out the slides there. Really interesting and a lot to take away that people will be able to, as I say, take away. But I think it really brings to life around the importance of a local network and being able to work towards cultural change and highlighting the part that each of us plays within that. We've now got a small amount of time for questions, so if there's anything that people have popped into the chat, or if anyone wants to obviously unmute and ask a question for Muir regarding anything that he's spoken about.
Or make criticisms. Now, arguments are very good for reducing your risk of dementia.
Have you got any questions? People a moment or two.
I've got one, if that's all right, Elise.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Morning, Samir. Thank you very much for that presentation. It's really interesting, and I work in the Medway Public Health team.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah, so I look after the physical activity programs here, and
the activity, physical, cognitive, and emotional. You mean, Chris? Do you?
Indeed.
Yeah,
well, that's
good man.
It's a very, I mean, that point in itself is hugely interesting. I think the mental health aspects of coming together to exercise as groups is something we focus on a lot here. I think one of the things and one of the challenges that we face at the moment is getting that message through primary care, through GPs and pharmacies and the like, as you mentioned, and out to the community. That exercise on prescription approach in order to use physical activity as a prevention tool, if you like.
Yep.
We're trying to use the Everyday Active website that the Kent Sport guys have produced to use as a community notice board and a physical activity finder in localities. I guess my point is we're finding it a little bit difficult to get our message across to very busy primary care networks in order for them to help us do our job, because I think that's the key, really. It's everyone's responsibility in healthcare to promote physical activity, the benefits of physical activity, and we're just we struggle a bit with that, and I think it's an interesting point I'd just like to raise to see what your thoughts are on doing that.
Well, I think if Kent's a complex geography, I know, and I don't fully understand it. But if each of the public health teams, or each of the, there are 3 or 4 networks in Kent, aren't there, in terms of where the flows are to hospital services. But if we could find some keen primary care teams or keen GPs, what we're doing is we've got a pilot running in southwest London where activity prescriptions are automatically issued by the general practice linked to a drug prescription. So if your mum were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, Chris, she would automatically get information about type 2 diabetes and join a group to discuss how to cope, because other members of the group are often better knowledgeable than the primary care nurse or the GP about how you manage your glucose meter, for example. There would be or the social prescribing people would be pouring local activity prescriptions into that. And there would be information from Age UK if you've got housing or heating or finance problems or where Generation Games is. So, and this will happen whether or not the GP remembers to press the button. It'll be linked to either the word metformin or the word type 2 diabetes. They're very busy, these people. So we're activity prescriptions. So I think if you could find some keen GPs and practice managers across Kent, Elise, because there'll be some out there who want to do it. They're quite techy, probably. They like the idea of doing it, but we've had approval from what's called NHS Digital that this can be done. So activity prescriptions will be linked to every drug prescription.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you. That'll be really interesting to see the outcomes of that pilot.
Find me a GP or two.
We'll do that. Don't worry.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Muir. And as you said, if there's pilots, or we'll certainly, as I say, find some interested, willing people to get involved, and we welcome them in Kent and Medway. So we can chat further about that, Muir. Thank you.
Yeah, great.
Are there any further questions from anyone?
Anyone here? Age UK is speaking next, so we'll hear from them.
Can I just make a point, please? Beverly Emerson, Sports Development Officer, Tonbridge and Malling Borough Council. We're currently just starting at the very early stages of a project with a local PCN in Tonbridge to set up a therapy garden, which will be great because it will be right in the middle of a sort of deprived area.
Yes.
And I think that raises a lot of issues for us in terms of, we've been working with this area for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I think in a lot of cases, the messages are getting out to people that there are programs, there are activities, there are services available to them. But in a lot of cases, if there's a mental health issue or some level of isolation, actually making that move to step outside their door to access those services is a really big ask for a lot of them.
Yep.
And I think that's where there's something missing in the jigsaw at the moment. These people need a bit more hand-holding to get them to the activities and the services that are there. They're accessing their GPs and healthcare services, but I think for what we're trying to do in terms of getting these people to engage and take part, they need a little bit more assistance to actually get them from their homes to where the activity, even if it's right on their doorstep, because it's just such a big step for them.
Yeah, well, I think that's, I don't know if you've discussed this with the social prescribing lead for the PCN, but social prescribing, there's two aspects of that. One is remembering to offer people something as well as drugs or psychological treatment. And that could be physical activity, or it could be a link to Generation Games or linked to the local library service. But the social prescribing teams, they recognize there's a subgroup of people who need more than just knowledge. And they would see it as their job to find ways to help that person make the first step to get out. And but I'd be very interested in your therapy garden too, because we know that the green environment is even better for you than activity elsewhere. And I work with someone, Peter Brambleby, who's full of, he's got a wood up in Yorkshire. He was a director of public health, and there he says we should be reducing the amount of carefully managed gardens and shelter housing schemes, and give at least half the garden back to the residents to get on with things. So it's great you're doing something like that. But the social prescribing lead worker is the person to discuss this with, and it's recognised that that's one of the key functions of social prescribing. I don't know if there's anyone in the group who is working for social prescribing. I don't think we've got many NHS people. Many NHS people in the room? No, I don't think so. Okay, good work. Good work in Tunbridge Wells.
Thanks, Evelyn. Got one final question?
Yeah, so it's kind of a point and a question together. So Rosaria speaking from Vitality Hub. So it's leading on to actually what we discussed earlier. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but it was about a combination of things, of finding social prescribers and accessing the right people within GP surgeries. So usually what I've found in the past is the receptionists are kind of the gatekeepers. They're not letting anyone access the doctors and things like that. And I don't know whether it's worth, or if you've heard of or come across any projects or systems in place that encourage those kind of employees to be trained or have the knowledge to do that aspect, because whether it's a service provider connecting with a receptionist, so that when a service user comes along and says, oh, I would be interested in blah, 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 do you know anything about anything that's going on in this area? If that, because obviously getting access to the GPs and even social prescribers, it seems nearly impossible. So I don't know if you know of anything that's worked or.
Well, this is one of the aims of Living Longer Better. I think the population of Kent is 1.2 million. Am I right about that? Maybe more, but our estimate is there's about 1,000 people per million population whose brains we need to rewire to think in a different way. And I'd include most GPs in that, but reaching them is very, very difficult. But I would certainly be going for someone who's a receptionist or practice manager in every health centre. And I'd get them to think about their mum or their dad or their grandparents, and we'll give them a learning program. It's very similar to the learning program that we're offering older people, but it gives them just a little bit more to think of in their day job. So wardens of sheltered housing, receptionists, primary care managers, people in care homes. These are the pharmacy assistants. So it's the pharmacy assistant who meets the people. I'm also very interested in pharmacy drivers who deliver things to people's homes. So yes, I would see that you've picked a very important group, Rosaria, and we'll be offering you, this group here, learning opportunities to see what we're doing. It's very, very simple, but it's about the talk I gave, really, and it's online and a number of quite short modules that you can listen to while you're doing the washing up. And there's interviews with key people. So yes, you're quite right. That's a key group, and the mission of Living Longer Better is a cultural revolution, and the primary care staff, including the GP if possible, but the receptionists and the primary care nurses, our practice nurses, are of central importance in this, and we will also automate it that send this out digitally to people. But I know that needs digital inclusion, which I'm sure you're working on in Kent also. So a very good point, Rosaria.
Thanks, Muir. Thank you. And thanks for the great questions as well. We will move on because I'm conscious of time, but also aware that there will be the chance a bit later on to sort of have some discussions. And so if there's particular things, challenges at the moment, and that's the moment to raise them to sort of see how the network can help going forwards. So there will be the opportunity. But I'm going to now hand over to my colleague, Andrea, who's going to introduce our local case study. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks, Elise, and thanks, Muir. Very insightful indeed, and lots to think about. And hopefully today will be an opportunity for us to start moving in the right direction together. Next up, I would like to introduce you to Alex Cook, in-betweener coordinator at Age UK, Herne and Whitstable. Shortly, Alex is going to tell us about what they're up to, how they're using activity to engage with their service users and to embed it in their day-to-day work to benefit them. First of all, just before I bring Alex in, just part of the work that's been happening with Age UK is around using the Tackling Inequalities funding, which is funding that we administer, comes down from Sport England, and it's very much about trying to reach those that have been most adversely affected by COVID-19, particularly targeting ethnically diverse communities, lower socio-economic groups, and importantly today, those with long-term health conditions and disabilities. We've currently still got some funding available to be spent by the end of March 22. So if you hear things today, hear about potential opportunities, meet a new partner, and you'd like to kind of pilot something between now and the end of March, that funding's available. And the even better news is that this week we should be hearing from Sport England about further funding to take us through to March 23. So if you haven't got something immediately ready to go, then there will be further opportunities to access that funding. And we can support you in terms of linking you up with relevant providers if you're, not linked in directly with activity, and really support you through that process to get a submission into Sport England. Grants available are up to £10,000. I think what the funding has shown that actually even quite small amounts of funding can work really well in terms of engaging with these communities and getting something started. So without further ado, I would like to introduce, as I say, Alex, and we're just going to ask Alex a few questions just to explore what they are doing at Age UK and Herne and Whitstable and how they are using physical activity. So welcome, Alex. Thank you for your time today. Can you just kick off by giving us a brief overview of what you've done, what you're planning to do in terms of using physical activity to benefit your service users?
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. As Andrea said, my name's Alex. I'm the in-betweener coordinator at Age UK and Herne and Whitstable. It's a new role. It's pretty aimed at older person, so people age 55 plus, who perhaps we've not traditionally worked with before. Part of that has been to focus on our strategic aim, which is to improve physical activity opportunities for older people in our local area. And it kicked off in June, excuse the pun, with our walking football programme. That was funded by the FA and Kent Sport England, sorry. We received £5,000 grant to set up 2 walking football teams across the district that we serve. It's going really well. We're in our 4th month now. It's getting to the stage where we're starting able to assess the impact. We've got 2 teams attended by average of 25 people in each. So we're running at full capacity now, and we're constantly getting people asking to join. So much so that I'm looking at setting up another group if I can get some money to set that up. So it's been really popular. We've done some basic impact measurement with that. When people joined the programme, they were asked how many days in the past week they'd done physical activity of 30 minutes or more. We plan to follow that up at 3 months and 9-month intervals. So the first cohort of people that joined have just been asked that question again. I've been adding up the figures. I should have solid figures soon, but it looks like around 90% of the people that have attended have increased their levels of activity by 1 day or more a week. So that was one of our main aims, to get people to join not just the walking football programme, but taking control of their physical well-being and engaging in other services, which it looks like it's done so far. We've, as Andrea said, recently secured tackling and inequalities funding to set up 4 new services. One of those is our Tai Chi movement and wellbeing service. We've got a fantastic volunteer coordinator who's a qualified Tai Chi instructor. She's been running that for 8 weeks now. It's specifically aimed at people with disabilities, long-term health conditions, as Andrea said, and we've offered it to people that already use our services through our day centre, but also to the wider public in our local area. Again, it's in its infancy at the moment, so we've not been able to actually do any impact measurement work, but the feedback's fantastic. We've had really good support from our primary care networks. A lot of people that have used the Tai Chi service in particular have been referred to the local mental health team, Canterbury Mental Health Unit, or GP surgeries. I don't know if it's out of the ordinary, and perhaps we're just lucky in the Herne area that people seem to have a strong focus this year, especially on working collaboratively. But I'm looking at developing our relationships with GP surgeries so that we can get more referrals that way. Because my main concern is that we have a huge client base already, with a lot of people using multiple services, but we might not be reaching new people who we've not interacted with before. And they're the people that really I'm looking at engaging. and we can't do that on our own. Those referrals will come from social prescribers, GP surgeries, everything that Samuel mentioned. So yeah, sorry, rambling. More services I could talk about.
That's great.
Yeah, that's actually its second session is happening today. Slightly more tricky with the walking rugby because walking football is obviously a hot topic at the moment. It's supported nationally by the regulatory body, the FA. Not really been the case with walking rugby. It's not something that's regulated by England Rugby at the moment. I've been in contact with them, the club development officer for England Rugby, and he said that he's looking at next year making it a more national project where they can try to make it a more inclusive sport so that people who have suffered injury or just people that are past the usual age for participating can still join in. So yeah, I'm hoping we could perhaps act as a pilot for that. But again, it's early stages, so we've not done any measurement yet. But I'm positive. I think it's going to be really successful.
Great, thanks, Alex. I think for me, just picking up something you said right at the very start of your talk there was around it's a strategic aim for you, and so you've got it. It's at the top, and it's there as it's an organisational aim, and so you've got buy-in from the top, which is obviously fantastic. And I'm also aware that you've been doing some work with us around trying to upskill your staff in terms of having those conversations with people and service users about the activity and how it can benefit them, and helping in terms of signposting them into things like Everyday Active that Chris mentioned earlier to help find out about opportunities, which again is really positive, and it shows how you're trying to kind of embed it across the organisation as well as putting on the activities, trying to upskill the staff and kind of bring them on the journey with you, which I think is really positive. And also the fact that you've mentioned the impact measurement and evaluation that you're doing alongside it, to kind of make the case and demonstrate to others, that the impact that it can have, which I think can only help in terms of particularly linking in with healthcare professionals, etc. And I'm sure people will be keen to hear more about that in the breakout rooms and how you've managed to successfully do that. From your perspective, why do you think it's important to offer physical activity opportunities and to embed it in your day-to-day work?
I think this might have been touched on already, but I think the general aim now across healthcare is to look at ways of preventing worsening of conditions that add to people's reliance on health and social care. I think if we can engage people in the early stages of aging, I think there's a much better chance that we can improve their health from years that it never gets to that stage. What was I going to say?
I think you're saying exactly the right thing, Alex, and we've got to market this better. So we've got to market this. This is where I'm discussing with Kent Sport. The NHS is going through another reorganisation. It'll be my 22nd, I think. But this one actually is very important because it's encouraging systems, partnerships and networks. And we've got to make sure that Age UK and Active Kent are involved at all levels in these new partnerships. And the benefits are terrific because the evidence is we could, within 3 months, increase people's strength, stamina, suppleness and skill, which will reduce falls. And I think it's great what you're doing because you're tackling a group I talk about. We hear about deprivation, and that's obviously very important. But there's another difficult group in society called MEN. And when I look at photographs of the Generation Games, for example, I don't see many MENs. So I think this particular subgroup of society needs this sort of thing you're doing. So very well done in going for this.
Thank you. And off the back of that, I don't think, like everybody said, it's not going to be achieved by one organisation working on their own. I'm constantly developing relationships with other local organisations, but we're looking at a programme that we could run with our local CCG, Kent CCG, that focuses on digital inclusion, which a lot of what we do promoting our work is on social course, that's not going to meet. It's not going to be received by a lot of older people who aren't on social media. So there's a lot of collaborative work going on of looking at developing a partnership with Active Life, a charity who are looking at improving local sports facilities. So Kent Active Life. They've got expertise that we don't have. Obviously, we're very good at working and engaging with older people, but we're not physical activity experts. So sharing resources and learning between different organisations, I think, is definitely going to be how we move forward.
I think that's a really good point, Alex, and that's certainly something we've learned from tackling inequalities funding. I think that the funding has really helped in terms of bringing the general voluntary community sector together with sport and physical activity sector to, as you say, share experiences, knowledge of the service users and then of the physical activity sector to kind of make things happen. And I was going to kind of just touch on, in terms of, you've talked about kind of working with other partners, in terms of actually using your service users and engaging with them to help shape your approach going forward. Do you do much in terms of consultation and engagement with your service users to help shape what it looks like?
Yeah, we do. A lot of the physical activity programs that we've started were off the back of consultation work we did just after lockdown ended, particularly with our dementia outreach service users. We looked at finding out what activities they would like to take part in going forward, and they were overwhelmingly activities involving sport, walking, and things they could do together with other people, which I think obviously highlights the social aspect of it. Everybody who experienced lockdown can relate to being lonely. A lot of these people are caring for people with long-term illnesses, and a lot of them have long-term illnesses themselves. And yeah, I think it highlighted just the fact that they were desperate to get out and do something active. So our walk and talk group, which is due to start next month, was born of that consultation. The walking football programme that we decided to get involved with came out of that as well. And people, since starting those, people have kept coming forward with new ideas about what they'd like to see. Obviously, it's not all possible because we're used to running a lot of our services either from our centre or in clients' homes, and now we're working with sports venues and local sports clubs, which is territory for us, and me, because I've never done that sort of work before. So a lot of what we're doing is based on, well, really with the help of the service users, because everybody's coming together to form a working group where we can talk about venues and where they'd like to hold it. So yeah, we work closely with them.
Great. That's great to hear. I'm conscious of giving other people time to ask you questions, because I'm sure there'll be some out there. So I've just got two more quick ones I'm going to ask you. If you could pick one piece of advice for others here today in terms of offering and embedding physical activity, what would it be?
One piece of advice, to extend the network as much as possible, because without the support of our local leisure centres, local sport clubs, so Herne Bay Football Club, Whitstable Rugby Club, a lot of what we're doing we wouldn't have been able to do on our own. It probably depends what area you're working in anyway, but the more people the better. It means that the service is a lot more far-reaching when you're doing engagement work, if you're promoting it across different services. It means it's more likely to be user-led, because obviously they're identifying clients that we wouldn't ordinarily have worked with. So yeah, as much networking as you can and encourage partnerships in your local community.
A great bit of advice, and hopefully this network can help everyone in terms of achieving that as well. And so just to finish from me, can you briefly summarise your ambitions for the future in terms of physical activity or activity?
I mean, going forward, as I said, we're going to do a lot more work with Kent CCG. Part of that is enabling people to access healthcare services through digital platforms. I think that will complement our physical activity programs quite well, because again, it will be reaching people who we just can't at the moment. There's the people who are stuck indoors with no way of getting out, we're not necessarily reaching. So yeah, I'm just focusing on the preventative action that we can take to avoid people needing the other services we offer as they get older, like our day centres. Encouraging learning across our consortium, because obviously we've got a number of Age UKs across Kent. It's not just Herne and Whitstable that are looking at doing this, it's across the consortium. So everything we're doing, all of the monitoring we do at the end of next year on the efficiency of the programmes we've been delivering will go a long way to all of our aims to kind of improve access to physical activity for people across Kent.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. And thanks very much for answering my questions. I think we've got time, Elise. Have we some questions from the floor? Anyone have
If we maybe just take one quick question, and then we can pop anything else in the chat as well, which can be picked up, and then we'll go to break. Thank you. So if there is one question from anybody from the floor. If not, if people are still reflecting on that, as I say, we can use the chat for questions. But thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you ever so much, Alex, as well. I think it's an excellent example to hear the work that you're doing. Obviously, the collaboration as well with key from the projects that you are delivering, and fantastic on a local place-based example as well. I'm sure there's a wealth of other things going across the county and future network meetings as well. We would like to highlight other case studies, but yeah, really very, very interesting and a lot there. So thank you, Alex. Muir, you have one quick question?
No, just to say, great work's taking place. And I think what we defined all these projects like Ageless Thanet, and the idea behind the network, it's not a new, we're not taking over anything, it's just connecting people with one another. So what we've done in many places is set up a Living Longer Better website, and Age UK would also be a member of that, as with Ageless Thanet and others. It's knowledge. What we say is that we've discovered the elixir of life. It's called knowledge, and it's consumed by lifelong learning. So I think what we'll do as a result of this is get a network website up where all these different organizations we're all equal, and I think there's terrific knowledge that we need to just bring together. So very nice meeting you all, and I know where you live now, so we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Muir. I know you need to go at 11 as well, so as I say, thank you for the presentation, and we'll follow up with everyone afterwards. Okay, we're just going to head into a very quick break, give everyone a chance to stretch your legs, grab a cup of tea. If I can ask people just to come back 11 o'clock, so about 8 minutes, make them quick, and as I say, we'll see everyone at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Few returning to seats, so we'll get going again, say conscious about time. Hopefully that gave everyone a chance to stretch their legs and boil the kettle, and as I say, all got cups of tea, etc. now. We're going to kick off the last half hour. We will go into breakout groups, but we're going to show a very, very short video first of all of, again, one of our local projects. It's a Nordic walking group which took place on the Isle of Sheppey, which was a project delivered by Sheppey Matters, so voluntary community organisation, and it was another of the projects that received Tackling Inequalities funding. So an excellent example, as I say, a really powerful clip, and you'll see from the clip itself the difference that the project is making to the lives of local people in that area.
I started the Nordic walking to help me lose weight. Basically, I was doing a weight management course up at the hospital, and Julie came up and introduced us to the Nordic walking, and I've been doing it ever since. My name is Margaret Barnes, and I live in Sheerness. I never used to go out for walks. I used to come out of the house, get in the car and drive down to the town and drive home, and I never walked anywhere. It's my COPD that stops me walking. I don't have any problem walking with these.
I've noticed now that Margaret actually uses her poles all the time, because it keeps her upright and it helps with her breathing as well.
Exercise all of your body, your legs, your arms, your breathing. It helps it all.
It's made a huge difference to her because of her balance, particularly. It gives her confidence to be able to walk outside.
And it's a good sociable thing. You know, I live on my own, so it's nice to get out and talk to people. You know, it's the company that really, really and truthfully makes it go. I feel that I'm doing something now, you know. Without the Nordic walking, I'd probably be sitting down indoors, seizing up. Nordic walking has changed me.
Thank you. I think you'll agree, as I say, a really powerful tool demonstrating the impact that project is having on the lives of local people. And there are many other projects that we're working with and we will be capturing by film. But as I say, certainly looking forward to work with more organisations through the Tackling Inequalities funding. So please do get in touch, as I say, and we will obviously develop more projects like that. So thank you. We're going to move on to breakout sessions. Just going to split you up into small groups. We have got a facilitator stroke note taker for each group, which is one of my colleagues from Kent Sport team. And what we would like to discuss, as it says on the slide there, is how this network will be able to support you in your role going forwards. We will pop the question into the chat as well. But just have a think, as I say, within your roles. There might be specific topic areas. It might be sort of challenges that you're facing, but how the network, as I say, can help you, and just thinking future, sort of going forwards, what would support you best, sort of topic areas. So, Lou, if I can hand over to you, we'll be in breakout sessions for probably about 15 minutes, and then come back, do feedback, and then close as well. So, if I can hand over to you, Lou, and hopefully everyone will move into their breakout sessions smoothly. Got a couple of minutes just to hear from groups. If there's anything in particular that people want to feedback, I will open up the floor to those colleagues who were facilitating note-taking. I mean, in the group that I was in, some great conversation. A lot around hearing from other organisations, that's really valuable. Also hearing challenges faced and hopefully being able to identify solutions between contacts as well. I mean, I was just looking at the chat and there's suggestions there from people, things like community navigators and connectors, and potentially people wouldn't have necessarily thought about those to contact or promote their activities. So some really, as I say, useful things that have just come out from what's already happened today with regard to the chat and the sharing of the information. I will just hand over to a couple of the others. If there's anything, as I say, just highlight one or two bullet points, key things that came out with regard to taking the network forward and how important and how that will be able to fit in people's roles. Is there anything, colleagues?
I'm happy to
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I actually saw the network happening in front of my eyes as we spoke. So we've already had a link up with two organisations. So they're going to support each other in terms of supporting their clients. So it was Rebecca from Age of Thanet and Christine. She was from the Kent Coast Volunteering and Befriending Service. So, you know, that I think is what the network is going to be all about. And everyone in the group was very keen to, you know, have regular meetings. I don't know what regular meant, but, you know, they did say meeting up and chatting. And sharing best practice, really, really important amongst our group. They thought that would really be helpful going forward. And just making sure we're linking better. And actually, Kelly, right at the end, put a suggestion forward. She's got a really good relationship with a social prescriber on the Isle of Sheppey. So whether or not we get them involved in the next networking event and they could talk about how they're working together would be really good, useful. So, yeah. That's it in a nutshell.
I don't mind just saying a couple of things. In our group, again, very similar. Real interest in hearing from others. I think also a bit around how that happens potentially outside of this group. So I think Muir mentioned a website. I mean, I don't know what that entails at all, but the whole concept of having something Kent-based where people can, the information can be held. If you can't attend a network session, then the recording of it can be held on there. But also people can upload information themselves to share, but there can potentially be conversations as well within that. Now, I'm so not technical, I've got no idea how you can do that or not, but it does sound a great idea in terms of being able to keep in touch when setting dates for meetings, etc. Inevitably, some people can't actually attend. So that was Rosaria's suggestion, which I thought is a really good one. And the other side of it was also about having a list of people who do attend the network, so that outside of these meetings, because whilst we'd all love to do face-to-face, it's not practical. Is there a way of sharing people's contact details? Data protection and all that, is an issue. But hopefully everybody who's on this call has got a work email and that they're happy to share that. So I think that's the other side of things. So the conversation can go on outside of this network. Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. Thank you. Anyone else? Just to pick up on a couple of things. Sorry, we have got a poll coming up, which we'll pick up on some of those regarding keeping in touch and contacts. And as I say, we'll move on to that in a moment. But Andrea, sorry, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, similar themes came out from our group. As Lucy said, I think we could have talked a lot longer, so that's great to hear. Around sharing information, links, signposting, and the opportunity to see real-life people doing activity and how the impact that's having is really powerful. The point at which Janine was cut off, she was making an interesting point around the We Are Undefeatable campaign, and since they've shown someone with Parkinson's doing walking football, the interest they've had has gone through the roof in terms of people wanting to do that. So it really does show the power that sort of media can have as well. And yeah, a lot of discussion around sharing the challenges and being open about the challenges, learning from each other and reaching out to communities together. I think was a strong theme that came through.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. Just conscious of time, we really do want this to be a proactive network and one which supports you in your roles. So going forwards, what we are going to do at the very, very quick, I'm say conscious of time, but a very short poll at the moment. And that was, I know one of the things you mentioned, Lucy, was around frequency of meetings. So just to get an initial idea and gather some thoughts. So if I can hand over to Louisa, just very quickly, just for the poll, which hopefully people will be able to access, just a few short questions to get some ideas and thoughts. Thank you.